Hi, my name is Stephanie Stillo, and I'm a curator in the Rare Books and Special Collections Division, and this is another segment of From the Vaults. So today I want to talk about a very special book in the Aramount Library, which is Joan Mirau's Constellations. So Constellations was a collaboration between the Catalan artist Mirau and Surrealist poet André Breton. And it was produced by Pierre Matisse, who was the son of Henri Matisse in 1959. And what makes this book so incredibly special was it was this wonderful collaboration and sort of call and response between the artist and the poet, so people could have greater access to both of their work. So what we have here are pochoir or stencil renderings of Mirau's original Constellation series. So the Constellation series was originally composed in 1940 and 41. This was a very difficult time in Mirau's life. So he was living in Normandy when it was bombed by the Nazis in 1940, and he was forced to flee to the Spanish island of Majorca to stay with his wife's family. So it was during this very turbulent time in Mirau's life that he composed the original Constellation series. So Constellations is filled with Mirau's biomorphic figures. So figures that are taken from nature but have abstracted forms. So here we have Women Encircled by the Flight of a Bird, which is a very poetic title, and which is true for all of Mirau's Constellation series. They all have very poetic titles. So we can see that the illustration has an almost dreamlike effect. And this is true for most of Mirau's Constellation series. So here we have the central figure of a woman. We have another one up here. And then we have these bird-like figures that encircle both of them. And this was really the point of Mirau's series, to create these dreamlike images that transcended reality and spoke to larger truths about his life during the war. So many of the paintings in the original Constellation series deal with the idea of the night sky. So here we have Morning Star, which has these wonderful pastels in the background that give you the sense of the early dawn. Here we have people at night guided by the phosphorescent tracks of a snail. And here you can see this darker background, this night sky, and then we have these wonderful dots of orange and white that create this luminescence within the painting. In January of 1945, the Constellation series was very quietly brought to New York and exhibited in the Pierre Matisse Gallery. And it was really seen as this expression of survival, of artistic creativity during the storm of war. The Constellation series for a lot of artists was really a flower in the desert. And Mirau really conceived of these paintings as something that was composed in one of the most difficult times of his life. So he writes about it, saying that this was an oeuvre realized during this terrible time when they wanted to deny all spiritual values and to destroy all that man holds precious and worthy in life. After World War II, the Constellation series was broken up, and a lot of the paintings went into private hands. In the 1950s, Mirau, André Breton, the great Surrealist poet, and Pierre Matisse decided to bring the Constellations back together to be able to make a very high-end reproduction to allow greater access to the series. And this was no small feat because the series had been dispersed throughout Europe and America. And in the 1959 release of the reproductions, you actually have a list of all of the people that contributed their paintings. So each one of the 22 paintings are listed, where they came from, and who offered them for the reproductions. So the constellation reproductions allow us to get a closer look at Murrow's original series. So here we have Sunrise, which is the first painting in Murrow's series. And we see that it has this beautiful translucent background with all these whirling colors. But the central figures are minimal and sort of block-like. Later on in the series, we have a painting called Poetess. And you see that it's much more crowded than this first initial painting. And this is really a theme within constellations, is that as you move through the series, the paintings become more and more crowded and more complex. So one of the wonderful things about these reproductions is that they're true to size. And this is how Murrow wanted them to be. And the reason why is that they are incredibly dense and they look like large frescoes. They look like large paintings, but their canvases were actually quite small. And this is exactly how Murrow wanted them to look. So he talks about how this is one of the most important things that I have done. And even though the formats are small, they give the impression of large frescoes. So the 1959 Pouschoir reproductions of Murrow's constellations came with poetry by André Breton, the father of surrealism. And Breton wanted to respond to Murrow's constellations. He was deeply moved by them after the war and was very interested in having a poetic response to Murrow's series. So here we come back to Women Encircled by Birds. And for Breton, he envisioned a poem that was very anxious, that was about being trapped and encircled and watched. And it really is true that Breton's poetry is not an interpretation of Murrow's work, but rather a response to it in many ways. These two men were dealing with feelings of exile, of trying to be an artist during the war, and they both have their own response that work together in the Constellation release of 1959. Thank you for joining us for another segment of From the Vaults in the Rare Books and Special Collections Division. I hope that you will join us again for more treasures from the Airmount Library, as well as other books from the Rare Books and Special Collections Division.